Welcome to Let's Make a Game, Platformer, episode 9. In last episode we've added the ability for the player to jump, and that was a pretty short episode, so that's it. In this episode we'll have to do some cleaning up. I have quite considerably changed the rendering in the gaming module here, and as a result the project no longer compiles. So we are going to be fixing it now, and that's going to probably take the whole episode. Okay, so what I've changed is that the rendering is actually done using events now rather than registering. Like previously we were here registering the renderer and stuff. This is no longer there. This class, as you can see now, it's failing. That's because we, instead of implementing this interface, will be now listening to an event. I think this is more suitable for an ECS system, where we get the events for free and the entities, and then access to this rendering entity is easier, and so on and so forth. So in here, instead of, so we don't need this anymore because this is going to be a separate event from this one, rendering the environment, and environment for light is going to be separate event, so we no longer need this part, which is one of the advantages of this approach. We'll call it render characters. We can call it now whatever we want, and receive event. So render environment event. We have to, of course, include rendering entity as passed to us. We are not listening for any specific components on this entity. Therefore, we just... Oh, something happened here. Yeah, unfortunately removed by mistake. So what has happened? Let me undo everything. Okay, so we have to remove this end of the line, and in here instead of, we have to get the camera from the event. Okay, that's pretty much it, except, yeah, that's it for this class. Now we have to fix also color provider. I'll leave it for later. This is another improvement I've done, which I think is pretty awesome and makes stuff much easier. I'll show it in a moment. And we delete this. We no longer have to initialize this. No longer need this method, which wasn't doing anything. And in here, receive event, render terrain, render environment, event, rendering entity. And what's funny about this is that we might have multiple rendering entities that we might switch between. Define in our entity environment, and they, for example, imagine having two cameras in some kind of 3D game. One of them will be showing stuff normally, the other will be showing stuff in infrared, so that those objects that are normally invisible in a normal camera view will be visible in the infrared. Of course, we'll have a different shaders for the infrared rendering, because you'll be like throwing the heat, basically radiating maybe even from each character. So then you would have two different cameras, and the way how you would figure out which camera is in use, you'll be basically testing whether it has an entity, whether this entity has a specific component, and then this is going to be called. For example, if a terrain has if the rendering entity has a component sees infrared entities, sees infrared characters, it will just draw in additional infrared characters and so on. So we can do some awesome stuff with this approach. That was not so easy with the previous approach. Okay, and so the last thing here I would like to do is introduce a new prefab here for let's call it rendering entity prefab. So that'll be a JSON file, and in here we'll add inject prefab manager, and in the initialize we'll just load the rendering entity prefab, and we'll create it based on this. So what happens with the background, as you can see, it's no longer available here, so we can delete this class. We'll just remember those settings here. Delete. And we no longer have to turn on the background renderer profile. So let's quickly run the application. Okay, sorry, I had some problem with the computer again. Sometimes for some reason the application doesn't start properly. This is not a problem with the application. I think this is some kind of IntelliJ and OpenGL issue. So we're starting here, and what happens is our background is black, so this is the default basically. Everything else works correctly. So how now the background rendering is done is that on the rendering entity you can add, I believe it's called, let me check, background color component. So the background rendering class, maybe I'll show it, no longer has a profile, but instead it is waiting on the render backdrop event, which is similar to rendering environment, which was just called earlier on. And this method is going to be called only if the entity, rendering entity, has the background color component. So what we're going to do here is specify red, and these are integers, so 145, green 186, and blue 220. And now restart the game. And we have our light blue sky color back. Awesome. So now the rendering for background is done using components on the rendering entity. Maybe I'll show one other problem that I like to fix while I'm at the whole fixing rendering, and around that is the behavior of resizing the window. So as you can see, the blocks, rather than the whole world being resized, and the blocks, instead blocks are stretched either horizontally or vertically, depending how you stretch the window. So how we fix it is extremely easy. So in the platformer class, there's a resize method, in which we call, sorry, not physics engine, the rendering engine. We have to just tell the rendering engine that we've changed the window size of the window. So this is going to be this screen resized with height. And now when we run the application and resize the window, it should behave correctly. Let's see if that is indeed what's happening. Yeah, everything stays the same squarish size, just that we see a little bit more. Awesome. Okay, I think that's it for this episode. Please make sure to like it and subscribe, and I promise in the next episodes I'll do some more game logic. I'm hoping to do some kind of, first of all, player death when the player falls out of the screen. Also, I'll be probably adding exit from the level, and well, we'll see how far I can go with that. Okay, thanks for watching, and bye.